What's up, everybody, to a brand new episode of Over the Top Talk interviews. I'm here with my co-host Anthony today.
How you doing, man?
Doing perfect. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great.
Perfect. And our special guest for today, former WWE slash WWF wrestler Bull Buchanan. How we
Hey,
doing today, man?
doing great, guys. Good to see you.
Good to see you too,
Perfect.
man.
I guess we can start. For anyone that doesn't know you, do you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
I was a wrestling fan from a young age, and in my early 20s, here in where I'm from, the state of Georgia, I got into business, was trained, and um, worked my way up through some independence to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Went over to Memphis, and then went to WWE. I stayed there for about 8 years, and then continued to go to Japan for about 8 years after that, and wound it down in 2014. And I've been a deputy sheriff ever since then.
Perfect. We can get into the questions here. What
Sure.
inspired you to become a wrestler in general?
Um, I was here in Georgia, so I got to see Georgia Championship Wrestling, Tommy Rich and Wrestling Number Two, and those guys were my favorites. Um, Later on, I was fortunate to find out that there was other wrestling out, and got to watch World Class, got to watch Mid South, Memphis, WWF at the time. So just I was a lifelong fan, and so there were some guys training here in my hometown of Bowden, Georgia. Olin James was the guy that trained me, James Hammonds, and I worked my way up from there.
Awesome.
Perfect.
What would you say is like your most memorable moment from like WWF slash WWE?
I think, my favorite match is the match that I had with Godfather. Um, right before he joined the RTC, we had a match for his girls, and of course the fans, they didn't want to see the girls leave, and I don't think anybody backstage did either. So um, there was a lot of heat during the match. There was a lot of heat from the crowd. So um, that's one of them. I don't know the acolyte. I always enjoyed working the acolytes. There's so many good tag teams there at the time. You had the Dudleys, you had Scotty Too Hottie and Grandmaster. You had those guys. You had Edge and um, Christian, the Hardys. It was just so many. Um, it was so easy to have good matches, with all those guys. But yeah, if I had to pick one, I would probably me and Godfather. And we were friends. We got to be friends later on, and that was pretty cool too.
Amazing. Can you share with us any interesting backstage stories you experienced during your time?
Well, I mean, probably the most memorable, probably the one that everybody remembers is I was actually there in Montreal when the whole thing went down with Brett. We were the Truth Commission at the time. That was my first run there, and myself and Luke Poirier and Kurgan and um, I think the commandant already left at that point. Don Callis was our manager at that point. So, but it was me and Kurgan. You know, all those guys were from Canada. So I think Luke had already left with his wife, and I think Don had already left. So me and Kurgan were still there. We were watching the main event, and when we saw it go down, it took a minute for it to sink in what had just happened. So I'm sure it did for everybody. Um, but when we realized what happened, we wanted to get our bags and get out of there because that was way above our pay grade at the time. So we got back to the dressing room and got our bags. And just as we're about to walk out the door, Gerald Briscoe comes in and says, "Hey, you guys stay in here. Make sure nothing," because Rhett and Sean were in that dressing room and said, just make sure nothing happens. That's pretty vague. We neither one of us wanted to be put in that position. Brett was kind of our benefactor at the time. The Truth Commission ideal was his, and everything. But at the same time, Shawn Michaels has never been anything but nice to me. I didn't work with him at the time, of course, but as far as just every day seeing each other, Shawn Michaels was nothing but a gentleman to me. So now we're in the middle of this, and we're like, oh God! And sure enough, the documentary was filming, and Shawn came in first, I think, and he was livid, and then Brett came in, and then everything you see on film is exactly what happened. We were so glad Taker finally came in. Taker has been the locker room leader for a long time, and he came in and he asked where Vince was, and I can't remember who it was, told him he was in his office and he was on his way. So Taker looked at everybody, and then by this time, just about the whole roster had gathered in the dressing room. I guess just waiting for an answer. We were just waiting to get out. Like I said at the time, we didn't want to be involved in anything like that. But Taker asked everybody to step out, so they, Brett and Vince finally came in, and Taker asked everyone to step out, and I was so happy that I actually stepped on the back of Brian Christopher, Grandmaster Sexy. God rest in peace. Man, he was a cool dude. But I stepped on the back of his shoe going out. He had to stop and fix his shoe halfway down the hallway. It was just mad rush to get out of there. And yeah, that's probably one of the most interesting ones.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What would you say is like the biggest challenge you faced in wrestling?
Figuring out who I was. Trying to figure out a character, trying to figure out that kind of thing. For the biggest part of my career, especially at the beginning, I was just basically told who I was going to be, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I wrestled as myself a little bit. Bob Armstrong was a huge influence in my career as far as from being a fan, and then actually getting to work with him quite a bit, even in Smoky Mountain. But Bob Armstrong had me do the Lord Humongous gimmick that Jeff Van Camp and Sid Vicious had done over in that territory, and he had me do it in Alabama. My first TV was a TV out of Atlanta, Georgia. It was called Superstars of Wrestling. It was North Georgia Wrestling Alliance. It was run by a guy named Sammy Kent, and he came up with a character called Sunset Sam McGraw. I was a cowboy from Las Cruces, New Mexico. I wore a mask. Then I went to Smoky Mountain. I was the Punisher. That was Jim Cornette's. So I've always been somebody's ideal, and then one day you figure out that, okay, who am I really? And I didn't really figure that out until I left. Unfortunately, I left WWE and I started going to Japan. And it really wasn't even so much in Japan, but that gave me a chance to, what I'd always wanted to do was just be a wrestler. I had got tired of being a gimmick. I just wanted to be a wrestler. So it gave me a chance to go over there and wrestle, in trunks and knee pads and boots and, kind of be myself a little more. And I figured out once I got back and started doing a lot of indie work here in Georgia and the Southeast at the time, I figured out that the character that I was trying to portray was really just me. It's like you've heard it a million times. You've heard Steve Austin say it, Rocky said it. It's yourself turned up, and that's basically what I was. And once I figured that out, it was so easy because it was just being yourself, and that's why I try to tell guys. The best gimmicks and the things that get over the most are just people being themselves. Actually, thinking of the guys that have gotten over so big, Rocky, Austin, those guys, they're not playing a character. They are a character. And I think that's sometimes what's missing from guys. And it's fun to see guys when they finally figure it out, and take off.
Perfect. Did you enjoy your time in the Right to Censor group?
Yes, I did. Like I said, me and Stevie had met a little earlier, so we knew each other. We were friends. Godfather and I had worked together a good bit, but we didn't really have a relationship other than just saying hey at the building and on the occasion that we worked. Uh, Val, same thing. He was a friend, so it was fun to get to do it with guys that you liked, and of course Ivory. Ivory was great. But yeah, me and Godfather actually started riding together, and I was I was a little skittish at first because I wasn't sure if he really liked me or not. And Michael Hayes, who was a guy that I kind of trust, one of the guys I trusted up there. I knew him from working on the Indies once again, down here in the South, and he told me, he said, it's always been my experience because at the time they just broke me off from Big Boss Man. And I was kind of floating between, I'd ride with the Acolyte some weeks and, Benoit sometimes and, other people, just whoever. I was just kind of car hopping and, occasionally just making the trip by myself. And Michael said, it's been my experience that, tag teams usually gel better, when you travel together. So I kind of took that as hey, you might want to. So I mentioned it to Godfather. And of course, he was like, yeah, man, come on, jump in. It was him and Teddy Long at the time. So needless to say, the rides were great, and we all got to be friends. And it was just a great time, man.
Awesome.
Amazing.
How would you say like you prepared yourself for a match every night?
I was explaining this to a young guy a few days ago. I play a match in my head, almost like a video or whatever. I run it back, almost like watching the game video of a football game. I run it back, I run it forward in my head. I'm seeing the things that I want to happen, and that's how I put it together. And I just keep going over and over and over in my head. And then afterwards, I do the same thing. But now I'm, just watching in retrospect. What could I have done here? What could I have done here? Things like that. So yeah, I mean, to me that works. I have to see it in my head, and you see it and you never know if it's going to work or not. But afterwards, when you play it over in your head, you can see, okay, yeah, that didn't work. Maybe scrap that and try something else next time. And that's just the way that it's always worked for me.
Awesome.
All right. Who were some of your favorite opponents in WWE/WWF?
There again, well, when we worked each other, me, I like guys, guys my size and guys you could really throw with, and nobody's complaining about getting hurt. I enjoyed working with Godfather, and I enjoyed tagging with him. Once we started doing that, but Ron and John were always two of my favorites because they were just two big old rough guys, and we just went out there and hammered each other, and it was fun, and it was I thought good matches for what it was. It was just a fight. There wasn't a whole lot of wrestling to it, but I think that's what people like to see sometimes. One of my mentors in the business, Tommy Rich, told me one time that people come for all different things. Some people come for the wrestling, some people come for the fights, some people come for the blood, some people come for the girls, some people just come to watch other people. You have to have a variety of things. And I always, thought, two big guys or four big guys like us, us out there trying to really wrestle each other, wasn't as entertaining as, four big dudes trying to beat each other up. So, they were some of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. How did it feel to like work with big names like Undertaker, John Cena, like The Rock, like names like that?
Oh, it's an honor. It's cool to say. I mean, how many people can say that?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I really take a lot of pride in. I've worked with most of the top guys in our business. In a couple of generation, spanning a couple of generations. I got to work with a whole bunch of the guys that came before us. The Tommy Riches and the Buddy Landells and the the guys like that. And I got to work with the Rocks and Austin and Taker and those guys. And then I got to work with Cena, and Randy Orton, and I got to see those guys, start and from the ground level, down in OVW and become as successful as they have been. It's a really cool thing.
Awesome.
Perfect. What was your like favorite match stipulation to compete under, such as like no DQ, ladder match, anything like that?
We did some ladder matches out on the road. I don't think any of them ever made TV or pay-per-view or anything, back during that time. But I mean, I guess mine was always a cage match. There was just something so, being a wrestling fan for as long as I have been, I started watching when I was 7, 8 years old. That was probably in 1976. I'm dating myself, 77, something like that, the cage match was always the ultimate, it was always the ultimate, there was no way in, no way out, 2 guys go in, somebody's got to win. Somebody's going to come out standing, somebody's not. And so, on the occasion that you get to compete in those, I always enjoy those.
Awesome. How would you say like you balance your how did you balance your personal life with like your wrestling life?
It was hard. I made up my mind when I first got in the business. I made up my mind that I would not let the business change me. Now that's kind of unrealistic. I think when you spend 30 years of your life doing something, of course it's going to change you. But I really meant I didn't want to change me for the worse. I wanted to come out a better person and a better person from it, not a worse person than I went in at. I wanted to come out the same way that I came in, and I think for the most part, like I said, I mean, it's unrealistic to think that it's not going to change you. It becomes your life, so of course it changes you. But I had there was a lot of nights that I drove from Louisville back to Georgia just so I could sleep in my own bed, just so I could wake up and take the kids to school and spend the day with my wife. Same with Memphis. There was a lot of times I would drive out and do the loop, which was a 6-day loop, and I would drive all the way home Sunday so I could spend a little bit of time with the family, and then I would drive back out there. So yeah, it's tough, and I tell these young guys, man, get it while you can. I don't want to say put a family on back burner, but if you don't have one already, get a few years in before you try to start, because it's hard. It really is, and it's obvious from from all the stories and all the documentaries that have been made. It's hard to juggle your personal life and this professional life.
Perfect. And kind of talking about your kids, we saw one of them is in NXT. How do you feel having a son doing something that like you once did?
It's the coolest thing in the world, I think. Like I said, I grew up a wrestling fan. I was a huge fan of Von Erichs. I was the only child. I didn't have any brothers or sisters. So I thought, that would be the ultimate thing, to have 3 or 4 brothers like that, So I was really invested in that whole story. But I never pushed any of my kids. I never asked them to do it or said, hey, I just made the offer. If you ever want to try, just let me know. And actually, both my girls actually tried. They got in the ring and actually did pretty good for the day or two that they did it. And it wasn't their thing. But Brooks, being my son, Brooks Jensen, he watched it from the time he was a little kid. I knew he was going to try it. You never know if they're going to be successful, but he's done really well. He was a natural. He was a good amateur wrestler. He was a really good amateur wrestler. He was a state champion. He really, at a young age, started lifting weights and doing things to get himself where he's at. And he came to me at about 14 and asked if he could do something on the show. And I let him referee a few matches, and then from there, it just kind of transitioned. I think he had maybe his first match when he was 15. But I was there. It was somebody that I knew would take care of him and get him through it. So and I just started following him. I went from being somebody to toting somebody's bag overnight. So I just followed him around all the indies down here in Georgia and around the South, and we had a great time doing it. I'm starting over again. My youngest son, Zach, is graduating this year. He's already got about a year under his belt. Same scenario. He's a big kid, 6'3", 6'4", 230. He was a really good amateur wrestler. So, I think he'll do well. If he applies himself the same way, I think he'll do really well.
Awesome. What advice do you think you would give to someone that's trying to become a wrestler?
I'd like to say it was something that I came up with, which would be really cool, but it's not. I heard it from somebody, but I just kind of adopted it as my motto. And I still have people come back, from 20 years ago that say, "Hey man, I remember you telling me that." The same thing I tell everybody. When you walk in somewhere, no matter what you're doing, you find the person in that room that's working the hardest. It's usually not hard to find that person. If it's the office, he's over there on the computer banging away at it. If it's a gym, he's over there in the corner by himself, just repping out. And you outwork that person. You outwork them. You find that person when you start and you outwork them. And if you do that, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be successful, especially in this business, because, if you're outworking everybody in this, there's a lot of cats out there. And, I got the opportunity to go down and be a guest coach for a few days. And, man, there's a lot of D1 athletes. There's a lot of studs down there. There's a lot of girls, same thing, D1 athletes. And they're hungry. They're young. If you can outwork some of those guys, then yeah, you ought to be in a pretty good spot.
Perfect. Our last question here, kind of looking back at your wrestling career, what were you most proud of?
It's hard to say that my proudest moment is not something with the WWE. I think anytime you're in the top company at the pinnacle of your sport or your business is, the Attitude Era, arguably one of the greatest eras of all time. When you're there, it's hard not to point to that. But, at the same time, I'd also have to point to my stuff in Japan. It was what I'd always planned on going. My plan was always, whenever my run in WWE was over, that I would go to Japan. And I got to do that and got to wrestle again with a bunch of guys that were my friends, Umaga, Taokea, Monica Mossman, and All Japan. Guy been over in All Japan for a while. D'Lo Brown, we tagged for years over there. So it'd be hard not to point to that. And some of the matches we had over there, especially me and D'Lo, once we got to Pro Wrestling Noah, some of the matches we had with Marufuji and Segura, Masawa and Ogawa, and even back to All Japan, having matches with Muda. I think our first tour over there, I want to say that, the last night we were there in the Budokan against Muda and his, whoever's Arashi, I think. So working with those top Japanese guys, because at the time in the early 90s, the tape trading had started, and it was a little easier to get access to that stuff. But I'd watched stuff from Japan. Fortunately, like I said, I grew up in Georgia, so occasionally on that Superstars wrestling program, they would show stuff from Japan. And I always thought it would be cool to go over there and wrestle. And then once I got in the business and kind of found out, how a little more about the style over there, it was really something that I wanted to do. So I got to do that. So, it'd be hard like I say, it'd be hard to not say the WWE, but at the same time, I'd really like to point to my Japan stuff.
Awesome.
Perfect. That's all the questions we got. But I mean, you're one of our first people that associate with WWE at one point that's came on air. So we thank you for
Oh
coming on
yeah,
here.
no
Thank you
problem
so
at all.
much.
No
Yeah,
problem.
it's cool when you get to interview someone that we've watched on TV before, clips all over the place. So
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. No, I like doing these things.
Our
perfect.
pleasure, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, have me back on
Perfect.
anytime.
Thank you.
Right.
All right,
You
bud.
have a
See you.
good day.
Yeah, you're welcome on anytime you want, man.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for everyone who watched on Instagram and YouTube, and you'll see us in the next one.